Hello. Hi, all. Welcome. It's Thursday night, Generational Change. I'm Jen. This is Lulu. Peter is apparently not here. So we're going to just start. I'm going to wait for a few more people to come on. We have two really great guests tonight. I'm looking forward to talking with Thom Hartmann again. For people who are not familiar with Tom, I can't imagine anybody who watches this is not familiar with Thom Hartmann, but he has this really cool series of books that are the hidden history of. So the last one was the hidden history of American oligarchy. This one is the hidden history of American healthcare. And they're really good. It's almost like taking a few really key things you need to know from the history of it and just putting it in a really easy to read thing. I really appreciate it. And I actually even audibled it. So there's that. And then we are going to be speaking with Stephanie Gallardo, who is running in Washington's 9th. I believe it's 9th. And so that'll be really cool. I have some news and amuse. I can do, let's see. I can actually do Bootlicker because I don't want to do something that's too much time. So this is actually, Bootlicker of the week is actually an institution, not a person. But I thought after watching some of these hearings with the FBI that would be a really good candidate this week. So I'm calling it the Federal Bureau of I'm gonna look the other way. Apparently the FBI wasn't too interested in protecting young gymnasts from a pederast that was otherwise known as their physician, and therefore looked the other way, falsified documents, falsified Ali Raceman's statement, Michaela Maroney's statement about what happened to her, and just totally just blew it off, didn't care, didn't think much about it. So I think that is just absolutely disgusting, and shame on them. Seriously, how disgusting do you need to be? So I don't know if any of you all watched any of that testimony. It was Simone Biles, Michaela Maroney, Ali Raceman. I saw clips of it. I didn't, watch it, but that's pretty damning. I mean, the man has obviously been a predator for a really long time, which is why he's been incarcerated for the rest of his life, really, where he belongs. I don't see him living very long incarcerated. The incarcerated community does not care for pederasts. So, but anyway, the FBI apparently was very complicit in this for years. So just didn't think it mattered. Anyway, we are going to be joined by Stephanie shortly. And then we'll get into our discussion with Tom. But I'm going to go ahead. I could start talking about some of these stories. Let's see. Here we go. And these are stories that I just found really kind of particularly interesting this week. But before we get into that, I want to say a couple of things. I have a little bit of a rant. Apparently, people are getting all over this AOC dress thing, or the Nina Turner taking a job at TYT thing. And it's the same. This is the same thing I would say about both of those things. Mind your business. Everybody has the role that they're playing and contributing in how they see best. And the amount of time that people spend talking about this nonsense just perpetuates the nonsense. So I find it all really silly. And apparently, Peter had put out a tweet on our behalf. And I just want to say that it wasn't me personally. I really wouldn't have even given it the time of day, second thought. I couldn't care less what Alex wears, what galas she goes to. None of that even remotely interests me whatsoever. And honestly, if it's that interesting to you, you really need to look elsewhere for more inspiring topics. Nina working at TYT. So I don't see what your point is. So somehow her taking a job at, unfortunately, what still is the largest platform on the left. It is. I mean, we might not like them, and they're definitely going down in numbers and stuff, but they're a large platform. So somebody who's wanting to spread a message, her message, that's been consistent all the time, should be able to do that anywhere she wants to. And quite honestly, it's the same way I feel about when people go on Fox or me going on Tim Pool's show, or me having Vosh come on, or any of those things. It's if you're being consistent with your message, then why does that concern people where you're putting it out? Do you just love your echo chamber so much that you can't handle the idea of somebody stepping out of it? And by the way, this is just apparently an announcement that Nina's going to be guest hosting or doing guest appearances, and they just can't railroad her enough. Like, it's not a symbol of anything. You people are like the guy in A Beautiful Mind, where you're seeing patterns and all sorts of, you really should get that checked out. That's honestly what I wanted to say about that. Another thing that's been going on and on and on is people about getting out of Afghanistan. Like somehow there should be an investigation into this. They're demanding hearings on Biden withdrawing from Afghanistan. But yet nobody's demanding hearings on why we were there for 20 years and the fact that we drone bomb people who we don't even know who they are, and just admittedly so. That's not worthy of a hearing. But what's worthy of a hearing is us getting out of Afghanistan. Yeah, that makes sense. So that to me is something that's been circulating about, and I wanted to comment on. Also, Bo of the Fifth Column, I always do a shout out, has a really good take on that. And if you guys always know, I'm always promoting Bo. So that was that was like the few things that I wanted to talk about. And I just think that it's so toxic right now. So I want everyone to know that my responses to a lot of these types of things will always be delayed because I don't see it. I have to hear about it after the fact. But I highly recommend to people, honestly, social media is toxic and is really ruining our lives. It is. It's just, it's making, everybody is so just mean and unnecessarily so, and so unproductively so. And I just don't need that level of toxicity in my life. I just really don't. And it's unproductive. If I thought that them just being nasty and mean and judgy was actually getting us somewhere, I don't know. I don't think I'd support it, but I'd at least understand the argument. But the truth is, people are just mean. And they're all so mean, and they're all working backwards from their conclusions. All of it. They've decided Alex is a sellout, so every single thing she does, there you go. She's a sellout. She's a sellout. Nina's a sellout too, right? So everything she does is just going to be proof of that. And it's like, it's so small-minded. It's so small-minded and so counterproductive. But anyway, so enough talking about toxicity. We are going to bring on congressional candidate Stephanie Gallardo. I think I'm saying that right. And if I'm not, I can't because I don't do the double L very well. But she is running in Washington's 9th. Hi.
Hi. How are you?
How are you? Good.
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So we've never met. I don't know anything about you. I mean, I have some friends in the Washington area, Jason Call and Rebecca Parsons, friends of the show, friends of mine. So introduce yourself and then talk a little bit about, because I have no idea geographically, like where you are in relation and what your district is like current representation and so on. But so just tell a little bit about yourself, like prior to getting involved in this.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, my name is Stephanie Gallardo, and you almost got it right. It's okay. You're all good.
Soy gringa, lo siento.
Está bien, no se preocupe. So I was born and raised here in Seattle, Washington. I currently live in the 9th Congressional District in a little neighborhood called South Park. And
I'm picturing my son cracking up. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay.
Yeah.
I visit South Park all the time too. So
go
ahead. Okay. So the district is, a lot of people think it's a little further south than it is, but it's actually composed of the south part of Seattle, moving from the central district and then all the way south. And it goes towards like North Tacoma. It encompasses a highly populated immigrant and refugee community. It's actually the highest population of immigrants and refugees in all of Washington state. It also has the highest level of people of color, Sorry, my cat, if you heard my cat.
I didn't even know what it was. It sounded like a gremlin. I wasn't going to say anything. Who am I to judge?
Yeah, so my district is it's a very, very diverse district, and I'm very partial to it. I have a lot of love for this location. My grandparents came here with my father and my aunts and my uncles. They came here in 1973 after the coup that happened in Chile. My grandfather was a socialist elected city council person in a little town called Puerto Montt, Chile. And they came here after that, and that's how they arrived here.
That's really cool. So you're Chilean.
That's right. That's right. I'm also half Mexican. My mom will always go off on me because I talk often about the Chilean side of me because they're the ones that live here in Seattle, but I don't often give enough credit to being Mexican as well. So, and of course it is Mexican Independence Day. So I will say that.
I was going to say, I thought, well, on the calendar, it calls it Hispanic Heritage Month, which I just find extremely like parochial and
Right.
not proper. But yeah, I don't understand what that means exactly, but I do know this. For me, it's often about food. And so and I also lived in San Antonio for 6 years and my son was born there. And so I very much am partial to Mexican Spanish and just Mexican food, but I could probably easily be swayed to Chilean food. I don't think it would be difficult.
Honestly, I'll be real with you. Mexican food is better than Chilean.
Is it? Okay. Okay. I'm not going to say, I don't know, but what, when you're talking about your refugees in the state, and that's nice that they're taking them. Actually, one of the stories I'm talking about tonight are states that are taking in more refugees than others. Mm-hmm. What do you see are the key issues that you're having? Because to me, I would imagine you're dealing a lot with housing issues, and the income inequality is probably outrageous if you're talking about where you're talking about. So talk a little bit about the demographic, because I imagine you're in an exponentially bad place as far as housing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We have extremely high houseless population, and of course, with the eviction moratorium, gonna be ending soon here in the Seattle area. Folks are going to be out on the streets very soon here, and if they're not already out on the streets, by now. And I would say that our refugee population is a very, very strong community. We have, Somali immigrants here. We have Eritrean. We have Ethiopian. We have Burmese. And, my point of contact with all these communities has been as a teacher. And so for me, I've had the privilege and opportunity to work with so many different communities and so many different languages, folks who speak different languages. And I would say the thing that we are struggling with most, in addition to housing, right, is the fact that we have a immigrant detention center right here in the 9th Congressional District. Mm-hmm. And, I try my best not to speak poorly on, my opponents or the people that I'm running against, but there's so much more that could be done. There has been a lot of progress. They actually said they are going to shut down the immigrant detention center, but I'm not going to hold my breath because, they say one thing in one moment and then can do something different in the next moment. And so in our communities, we're really, really suffering from folks who are being taken from ICE. People are living in fear.
So we don't need to really get into details about who you're running against, but just talk about, are you, and Peter would know if he were here because he knows everybody everywhere, but I don't know. So are you going for an open seat, and what is it a blue district? What is the sort of political climate there?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is definitely a blue district, very, very blue district. It's always been a blue district. It's also a fairly new district. It was created within the last 2 decades. And the person who I'm running against, his name is Adam Smith. So he's a very, very powerful Democrat. He's the chair of the House Armed Services Committee. He has a lot of funding from military contractors. He's truly, truly one of the highest receivers of money from military contracting companies and things like that. And the district is changing, though. The district has been changing. Our population of people of color, we're the only district in all of Washington state that has a higher population of people of color than white folks. And I think, our district is 100% ready for real representation and not just, representation at face value.
Okay, so you're dealing with a typical corporate whore Democrat that is basically a Republican that pretends to be blue because they are in a blue district. So it's that,
Absolutely.
right? Okay. But one thing I have noticed, and this is something where you have to walk a fine line when you're in a place like Washington, where you have such huge employers that are part of the MIC, because it's like, yeah, on the one hand, trust me, I think we should take all the money from that and like give it to like, everyone else. So, but the reality is that that is something that plays to people in terms of labor and workers. And you have to this is, I believe, how there are some that would be more progressive people end up voting in favor of things that are military contractors. And even if they weren't taking the money, this is my question, because obviously I know you're not taking the corporate money, but you still have to appeal to what could be a considerable job loss, or the fear of job loss in that industry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it is really tough. And, I often get, beat down by folks for being a proud socialist. The family that I come from is a socialist family. That's the full reason why we arrived here in the United States from the get-go. And so there are things that I'm learning on this campaign trail about how I go about working with folks who don't agree with me. But I also think the way that we do that, I think back to my career as a teacher, right? As a teacher, I've worked with racist teachers, I've worked with sexist teachers, I've worked with classist teachers, I've also worked with very revolutionary and amazing teachers. And you don't get things done by just, staying in your bubble and having an inner circle and, being friends with the folks that, you have real similar ideas to. But you also have to push the folks that are racist, sexist, classist, and all the other things. And so, and that's not to say that, the folks who may not be, super open to the ideas that I'm bringing to the table are racist, sexist, and classist. But there are some centrist folks here, especially along the water corridors of the Lake Washington area, because of course, if you live by the water, you have to have more money and some big, huge, beautiful houses here. But the thing is that I think once people get to know me and get to understand that I'm truly about the work of the people and truly about getting things done for everyone and not just for a few people, the ideas don't always have to be 100% in alignment if you understand that the candidate is doing the best that they can and will constantly be working for folks and open to talking to them.
Yeah, I agree. When I ran, I found that I had no problem whatsoever connecting with independents, libertarians, Republicans, not whatsoever. In fact, there's a lot of things that we do agree on, and I would actually get crap from our local Dem people for having connections in the Republican camp. And what's interesting is I created those connections from meeting at a protest against drilling in the Everglades, because conservatives are very for Everglades restoration here. Like they're not as pro development. And so there's this certain commonality, and yet I would get chastised for even engaging in these discussions. How are you being treated by your local Dem community?
It's sort of a mixed bag right now. I'm either being, honestly, I feel like I'm being ignored, if I'm being really honest with you. It seems that folks are just waiting to see if the campaign is going to take off before they even, try to get in the door with a conversation with me. And I think that's to be expected and very typical. But I would say the higher ups in the Democratic Party are definitely trying to keep me out. And that's also in alignment with what happened to Sarah Smith, who is a friend of mine, in 2018 when she ran against Adam Smith. She was, given barriers every single day to try and make those relationships with Democrats and folks in the party. And I expect the exact same. But I would also say there are people who I have found to be really kind and really open to talking to me. And I'm really grateful for those people, because even though I don't align with the Democratic Party on most of my viewpoints, I know that I'm running on the Democratic ticket and I'm going to have to get the work done with them.
I know it's not easy. It's not easy when you're stuck running on a party that really isn't your people. Like they're not my people either. I don't think I don't know that they've ever really been my people, but they've certainly become further and further away from my people. And they are they are the impediment to actual progress. It's not the Republicans. And this is something that people really need to understand. Most people are not that small group of Republicans. That's not most people. Most people are not that. So then who is standing up for the regular people? Well, it's not the Democrats. So that's the problem. So let's talk about like what your key issues are. I mean, obviously I'm sure you're universal health care. I mean, you're a social. First of all, kudos for just saying you're a socialist. I'm like a socialist libertarian, because on some things I'm really live and let live, but I believe in social safety net. So, I try not to label, but I do support the idea of workers owning the means of production, not necessarily in all cases, but certainly a mixed bag of it, certainly. So what are your key issues?
Yeah, so my key issues, well, let me just start with the fact that they're growing and changing every day, because I'm in conversation with different folks in the community every day. But when I started this campaign, I started on 3 key issues. The first one is education justice, and that's drawing on my experiences being an educator in a Title I school for the last 5 years, and then also working in Title I schools for 10 years before. And so when we're talking about education justice, we're talking about fully funding schools, but to a level that we haven't ever imagined before. Right now, the current federal budget for education is only at about $78 billion. And when we think about that in comparison to the military budget, it's just astronomically different, right? Right. And so I think about things from my time being a teacher, such as, the pathways to the school to prison pipeline, and how deeply affected, especially students of color, are in our schools. And the fact that educators that, I'm sorry, this cat here.
No, I'm having issue because now my husband had to let my dog in, and now she's scratching on the door. So I'm having my own problems. Lou, get over here.
Anyways, yeah. So as a teacher of color in the public school system, one of the things that was really difficult for me was passing the standardized test to actually not only get into a grad program to become a teacher, but then to, after I graduated, to become a teacher. And so removing these barriers for educators of color and folks from marginalized backgrounds to become teachers is extremely, extremely important to me. And then the second thing that is most important to me, and we're growing into, growing this platform as we speak, is a moral immigration system. And so this is where I really, really feel very strongly, because I come from a family of refugees. I have a mixed status family, meaning that I have undocumented folks in my family, folks with refugee status, folks with citizenship status. And so our family has seen the gauntlet of what interactions we have with immigrations and customs enforcement, and all the folks at the government level who have something to say about immigrants. And so I am definitely a proponent of abolishing the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement institution. I don't think it's necessary at all. It's new of an institution.
You're talking ICE. Like we need that. That needs to go. Right. Oh yeah. We never needed it in the first place. Yeah. I agree.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, the thing that I still take great issue with between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party is that they both have kids in cages at the border. And that I've had students come to my classroom after weeks of being literally in cages after they've moved to Seattle following being on crossing the border. And so I've heard the stories from young people. Of course, I've read the stories and, been able to identify what folks are saying. But when you actually have young people coming into your classroom having been in cages before, it really hits in a different way. And then the third thing that we are focusing on is building labor power. So I was a elected member of the board of directors for the National Education Association. And so, and I, that was my first election that I ever ran in, and I ran against an incumbent and I beat her. And it was, at the time, it was part of an incredible movement of, labor leaders in our state and national union. And so for me, at the center of everything is ensuring that working families have everything they need to be able to progress and advance in the ways that they identify for themselves. So boosting labor power, ensuring that unions have the ability to grow their unions and talk to folks in their workplace and not be fearful about having those conversations is extremely, extremely important to me. So those are the top.
So let's talk about labor for a second, because how are you doing? I mean, have you reached out to not, your local, obviously, but your teachers union? And they're very, very intertwined at a national level with the Democratic Party in a way that, especially with some of the incumbents sitting there.
Right.
So, have you reached out at all to see like how supportive they might, because that's a huge thing.
Yeah, I think they are, they are extremely supportive. I have great relationships with the folks at our state education union, the Washington Education Association. They're extremely receptive to me. They support. I had to have a conversation with them before I decided to run for Congress because I was still on the board of directors. And they were really gung-ho about the fact that I wanted to run because they know that that means an educator is going to be in a seat that has the power to impact not only labor, but education policy. So they are supportive, but of course I have to go through, the endorsement process just like everybody else. And the other thing I would add is that I have certainly been in talks with other labor unions, but as a matter of fact, what I've come across is that anytime a labor union has wanted to endorse me, there is a lot of fear about endorsing me because it's going to go against the Democratic establishment. And in fact, my opponent, I did get endorsed by a labor union. And right after I announced that endorsement, he called up the labor union and threatened them and swore at them and was extremely rude. He said he's better for labor than everybody else. It's a slap in the face to endorse somebody else besides him. And that's just very on par with the type of person that he is.
So he sounds like the male version of my congresswoman. She did the exact same thing. We actually got endorsed by the ironworkers. And as soon as that happened, she called like kicking and screaming and went, dug in and whatever. And then we got like ghosted.
Yep.
And I know that she did that. So I totally feel you. But teachers union is an amazing get. If you like, we can't possibly get that here for the same reasons. It's just, it is what it is. Okay. So give me your website. Let's tell people how they can help you. Guys, we need all of these non-corporate people to get elected. And especially somebody who is an actual socialist. This is an important thing for people to understand. Whether or not you are in fact a socialist or I am a socialist should not negate the fact that we should have that voice and that platform in our national discussion in one way or another. So, it's not like I just find that people are so threatened by things like that. I find it ludicrous. So what's your website?
It's www.electgallardo, and my last name is spelled G.
I know I can spell it, right? Did I spell it?
Yes, .com.
Okay.
So that's my website, and brand new website. We feel really proud of the website. So head there, sign up to volunteer.
A great picture of you, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Because I know that you probably did, like, you had your makeup done. You did like the whole thing, right?
I did.
Of course. Well, and it looked really good. So. Okay, so tell people where to follow you on social media. And guys, get involved. Just check in. Even following and subscribing and forwarding really helps. And also volunteer to phone bank when it's needed.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. So all my social media handles are the same as my website at Elect Gallardo. So follow me there.
Well, that's easy.
Yeah, it is really, really easy. I'm really appreciative of your time today, Jen. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And we'll have you back. Like when is your primary?
We're under a year now. So it's going to be in August, 2020.
Okay. Right. Yeah. But we're going to end up, like, I'd love to have like a day where we have all of our Washington friends on from the different districts. And we're going to break it down as we get closer and start having like some candidate panels. But thank you so much for coming on, Stephanie.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Bye.
Bye.
So that was cool, guys. Yet another really good non-corporate option running for Congress. And, I really want to reiterate that, please, people, share the word with your loved ones that socialism is not some sort of disease like leprosy or something like that. And it's actually a very valid ideal. It's a very valid way of thinking. So we're going to bring in Thom Hartmann. I see that he's here. And I just want to remind everybody, we're talking hidden history of American healthcare. Hopefully Tom won't be upset that I kind of cheated and audibled it. I've gotten very much into the Audible, but I will say this time I was a little disappointed because it wasn't Tom that does the Audible. I'm just saying. But this is the book. And we're going to talk about all sorts of stuff. I mean, this is very interesting to me. I can definitely history geek out with the best of them. And there were a lot of things in here that I would have never even thought of, but then now in retrospect makes so much sense. And so anyway, without further ado, hi.
Hey, Jen. How are you?
How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Nice.
So you heard that I cheated and I audibled.
That's great.
But I really liked it. I think it's the way that you do these, and I don't want to say it's like sort of history for dummies, but it's really taking like key points and key ideas and putting it together in a way where you're getting the important things that you need and it's easy to read. So I don't know. I don't know if I'm saying that. I don't want to sound like I'm saying it's for dummies. It isn't. It's for very smart people. But talk a little bit about this series in general, because up until the last one, I didn't know there was a whole series of these.
Yeah. I started this series actually about 4 years ago, or maybe 3. I guess this is the 6th book in the series. And I pitched it to BK Publishers, who's published a number of my books, Screwed and Unequal Protection and a few others. And what I wanted to do was come up, it's like nobody has time anymore to read like a 300-page book. I don't have time to read it.
Right.
And so a 300-page book is typically between 80 and 120,000 words. So I went to BK and I said, I'd like to write a series of topic-specific books, somewhere between 6 and 10 of them, and have them come in between 25 and 35,000 words each. So, which translates into around 130 to 160 pages. And I've been hitting about 35,000 words on every book because I just can't stop. It's hard. Yeah. It's hard to write short, but it is to write long. But I wanted them to be readable. I wanted them to be accessible. I wanted something that somebody could read literally on a Saturday and just, start at 10 in the morning and be done by dinner time. If they're a fast reader and over a couple of evenings if they're not, and tell stories and highlight history. And so we started with guns and the Second Amendment and how the Second Amendment was written the way it was when it was to preserve the slave patrols in Virginia and Georgia and South Carolina, and then went to the hidden history of the Supreme Court, and then the war on voting, and then monopolies, and then the last one was the hidden history of oligarchy and the threat of tyranny, basically in America. It's kind of about Trump. And then this one is the healthcare, why sickness bankrupts you and makes others insanely rich. The next one will be out in 6 months. It's on Big Brother and the loss of privacy. And the one after that, which I'm just starting to write right now, is the hidden history of neoliberalism. And that'll probably be the whole series.
Well, that is something we definitely need to know about, because maybe we could figure out how to get rid of that.
I agree.
How could we stop that? One of the things that I thought was really interesting in this, that it's sort of like a broader idea, but it was all the different ways that sort of healthcare has been used and manipulated, just its existence for political reasons. Like it's never been, people need healthcare, let's give it to them. That's not how it's been. There's been these much more deeper, kind of almost underhanded meanings as to why. I mean, one of the things was about in Europe post World War II, what you were saying, or that it was almost seen as anti-fascist, like the way to sort of ward off fascism was to do this. And then a couple chapters later, you talk about Ronald Reagan basically saying, "Oh no, we can't have that. That's socialist." So within like a couple of decades, you see it being used that way. And I was wondering, I mean, I don't know if that was like one of the greater themes that you were working on, but it really spoke to me.
That's great. Yeah, healthcare. there's a real checkered story here. I mean, the first single-payer healthcare system was actually in 1884. It was in Germany. Otto von Bismarck put it into place, and that was when that was the German Empire. That was before they were even a republic. And he did it. He was a militarist, and he did it because he wanted to have a healthy population and a healthy army, and this was the cheapest, most effective, most efficient way to do it. And he defended it loudly and against people who called him a socialist. And Otto von Bismarck was no socialist. He was to the right of way to the right of Reagan, and certainly maybe to the right of Attila the Hun. And so we go from there. But that same decade, the 1880s, was the decade that a fellow by the name of Frederick Ludwig Hoffmann, came from Germany to the United States with $5 in his pocket. He was 17 years old, and he was a numbers savant. This guy was a genius with numbers, and he got a gig with the Prudential Insurance Company and ran the numbers, for life insurance, and found that people who smoked were likely to get lung cancer. He was the guy who discovered that association. He co-founded the American Lung Association, in fact. That
all of the associations.
Pardon?
Like, wasn't he part of like all of those, the cancer, all of those associations?
Yeah, he was all over. I mean, he also discovered that there was an association between a diet high in processed foods and cancer, and the book that he wrote about that, which is about this thick, is still in print in 2021, and he died in 1946. So anyhow, he came over here in the 1880s and decided ultimately, after he'd become famous and wealthy and looked into all these things, that he would apply his skills to race. What's the issue with race in America? And so he ran the numbers and discovered in the 1890s that sure enough, Black people die at a higher rate and live less long and have a shorter lifespan and get sick more frequently and die of it than do white people. And he then drew two conclusions from that. One, therefore, it's clear that Blacks are genetically inferior to whites. That was his first conclusion, and which, by the way, was not all that inconsistent with the what was called scientific racism at the time. And secondly, that therefore, this was his big conclusion, therefore, if white people simply made sure that Black people never had access to health care, within a generation or two or three at the most, all the Black people, or a large enough number of Black people, would die out in America, that it would, quote, solve the American race problem. And he published a book in 1896 called The Race Traits and Tendencies of the American Negro, laid out this argument in great detail. I quote from it fairly extensively in the book. And this became the principal talking point. I mean, this echoed right down into the 1980s. This became the principal talking point against any kind of health insurance program when Teddy Roosevelt in 1912, as part of his Square Deal proposal, wanted to include a single-payer health care plan. This was the blowback. But what about the Black people? We don't want them to be insured. When Woodrow Wilson was looking at eugenics, he was using Hoffmann's research for the eugenics programs where they were sterilizing people in the United States, that program that Hitler adopted in Germany and turned into the final solution. And then in the 1930s, 1936, when FDR proposed single-payer health care, it was, but what about the Black people? When Harry Truman proposed it in 1947, it was like, we don't want Black people to get this health care. In 1961, when John Kennedy proposed a single-payer health care, oh no, what about the Black people? So in 1965, when Lyndon Johnson was putting together, and with Robert Ball was putting together Medicare and Medicaid, specifically Medicare, the Southern racist senators came to him and said, basically, we've got to put a high enough bar in this Medicare thing. You want to give free health care to everybody over 65. There's a bunch of over 65 Black people down here in the South. You got to put a high enough bar in here that they can't jump over it and end up in our all-white hospitals. And that's why there's a 20% gap in Medicare. It's why, if you're over 65, you've got to buy a Medigap policy to fill in that 20% hole. So from the 1880s until the 1980s in the United States, the main reason why this country never declared healthcare as a right, only as a privilege, unlike every other developed country in the world, was racism. Since the 1980s, it's been mostly because in 83, Reagan stopped enforcing the Sherman Act, and we went from hundreds of small insurance companies to a few dozen monstrous ones, and they have so much political power that they've just been able to crush any efforts to essentially put them out of business with single payer.
So essentially, we are so racist that we're willing to not have health care as a matter of principle. Like that, it's so demented and just so unbelievably absurd. Like, you know, at one point there was a point when I would look at the financial aspect of it and at least talk about that. Is that an option? But the fact that it's based on this is just,
well, and
again, I'm not surprised. I'm not like surprised.
No, it still is. Right now, there are 12 states in the United States that have refused to expand Medicaid. In other words, they refused to give health insurance to the working.
Oh, we're about to get into that because we're going to talk Rick Scott.
They are all slave states.
Yeah. So that was actually one of the things I wanted to talk about was the states that did that, how it is still so ingrained. But specifically, you know, in Florida, we were so lucky that we had Governor Rick Scott for 8 years. And the only thing that did that was remotely helpful is it made some of us not find DeSantis so horrible. It was sort of like our bar. He lowered the bar so far that we're just down there. But one of the things that Rick Scott did was basically kill people in a myriad of ways. But talk a little bit about how he did that regarding and how he was like positioned to have saved people and said, no.
Yeah. Rick Scott was a businessman. He owned an insurance, or was a large investor in a hospital chain, excuse me. And which was convicted while he was president of the largest Medicare fraud in the history of America. And he walked away with about $100 million, I guess, and used that to leverage himself into the governor's race in Florida. And this was all right after Obamacare passed. And the federal government was saying, we will pay 90% of your cost, Florida. We will give you, I forget the amount, it's in the book, billions and billions of dollars to expand Medicaid so that everybody in Florida who's the working poor can get it. There's a chapter in the book titled Rick Scott Killed Charlene Dillon.
Yes.
It's the story of this young woman. She was 32, as I recall, when she died. She had 3 little kids. And it's just heartbreaking. I've got a picture of her kids, and her little boy looks just like my son did at that age. It's just spooky. And she had a heart condition, and she had to take medication. And had she been able to take the medication, pay for the medication, she would have been fine. She was working 3 jobs, 3 part-time jobs, and she did not make enough money to qualify for Obamacare, and she made too much money to qualify for Medicaid because Rick Scott wouldn't expand it. And one day she was working her 3rd job, selling vacuum cleaners, and she dropped dead of a heart attack. And it's just, I mean, that's not just, her. I mean, there have been a lot of deaths in Florida, and it's happening right now.
Yeah, it's happening all over. And then you see people that have Medicare, and this is something that I really didn't completely understand. I haven't really had to deal with it yet personally, but when you're talking about the Medicare, the Advantage, and that the gentleman who you wrote about, who didn't really know, went out, got that, and then it turned out wasn't accepted where he needed it to be accepted. And then once that happened, it was too late for him to get regular Medicare. And that's not anything that I would have ever known. And to me, this sounds like some sort of scam. It sounds like the equivalent of charter schools to public education.
Yep.
And so am I, you know what I mean? Like, it's like they're skimming the money from the system that's meant for public health, but yet they're not really in the business of doing public health. They're in the business of profit.
It's the perfect analogy, Jen. And it is a backdoor strategy to privatize Medicare. And now about 1/3 of all people over 65 have bought into one of these corporate for-profit so-called Medicare Advantage plans. This was George Bush's great contribution. Excuse me. In 2003, they reformed Medicare, and they basically they carved out a hole in Medicare. Not even in Medicare. They created this thing called Medicare Advantage, which is not Medicare. It's private for-profit health insurance, or in some cases nonprofit HMOs and whatnot. And it has you have to jump through all the hoops. You've got to be in network, and you got to get approval for everything you do, and blah, 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 blah. And people just think, okay, that's how it's always been, so that must be normal. I've been on regular Medicare for 5 years now, and I'm 70, and I had back surgery a couple of years ago. I never saw not even a $10 bill, nothing. And, it's just because it's real Medicare, but had it been Medicare Advantage, it would have been a very different experience. And every year during the period of time when you can sign in, which is October through January, you get these hustlers on TV like Joe Namath going, yeah, and you can get, free rides to the doctor and gym memberships.
Yeah.
And all this stuff because, Medicare actually pays these health insurance companies on the back end for people, but not on a per person basis. There's a whole scam involved around this, so that the Medicare Advantage is insanely profitable for these companies. It's part of one of the reasons why you've got so many health insurance executives who are making millions of dollars a year, and in some cases $1 million a month. And in fact, United Healthcare, Bill McGuire walked away with $1.6 billion. He was followed by Stephen J. Hemsley, who walked away with $700 million. So there's big bucks to be made here.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously our biggest problem, are the things in this country that are for profit that ought not be. Yep. But what I can't understand is, how is this not more known? Why would someone do a Medicare Advantage plan? Why, what is there any real selling point to that? Like, why would somebody pick that? And then also the scary part about not being able to switch back.
Yeah. The part about not being able to switch back has to do with the Medigap plan, because Medicare, and I explained why a minute ago, but Medicare only covers 80% of hospital expenses. So you buy a private health insurance policy called the Medigap policy from, there's dozens of insurance companies that sell them, that fills in that 20% hole. But those Medigap policies were put into place in 1966 when Medicare was rolled out, or in 65 when it was written. And they're heavily regulated. They can't mess with you. They can't screw you. They can't take advantage of you. They can't do bait and switches. They can't, hassle you and whatnot. The whole lemon drop thing that I talk about in the book, where when on Medicare Advantage, when you start getting expensive, they start really making life miserable for you until you drop out, so they don't have to pay for you anymore. So the consequence of this is that the law says that when you turn 65 and you sign up for Medicare and get a Medigap plan, which is all that existed up until 2003, they cannot consider pre-existing conditions. So if you're diabetic, or if you have a heart condition, or whatever, arthritis, fill in the blank, it doesn't matter. But you have to pay for those private policies. I think the one I have is like $130 a month, to fill in that 20% hole. So because the Medicare Advantage is not heavily regulated like the Medigap plans or like Medicare itself is, it's kind of the Wild West. The Medicare Advantage policies, because they figured out ways to scam the system and make so much profit, they will offer, in some cases, some of the Medicare Advantage policies you have to pay a couple $100 a month for. They tend to be the better ones, like from the HMOs like Kaiser. But then there's ones where, hey, it's a $0 policy. You can get it for free. And this appeals to people who have very, very low incomes. And it sounds like you're getting Medicare, because after all, it's called Medicare. In fact, it's Medicare Advantage, even though it's not really Medicare. And Bush spent his whole political career in '78. He ran for Congress on a platform of privatizing Medicare and Social Security. It's always been his goal. He thought that they were socialism, just like Ronald Reagan did. And this is it. This is their attempt to destroy Medicare, or at least privatize Medicare. And it's also going to be their big bulwark against Medicare for all, because they'll say, eventually the compromise, I'm guessing, that they'll go along with is, yeah, okay, if you want to do Medicare for all, just let us also offer Medicare Advantage for all. And the problem is the industry has these two policies, these two things that they do. One's called cherry picking, which is where they offer things like gym memberships, so that when people are 65 and they, if they're healthy, they're more likely to go, oh, a gym membership, I'll take that. And they want the healthy people because they don't cost anything. Or when you start getting sick, when you get a 75, 80, something like that, and you start, getting expensive, then they do what's called lemon dropping, which is where, instead of having your doctor have to call the insurance company once to get approval for your surgery, they may have to call 6 or 7 times and get turned down over and over and over before the insurance company finally says yes. And at that, at a certain point, people just throw their hands up. There was an article just day before yesterday, and I'm sorry I don't recall where. I think it might have been in the Financial Times. I talked about it on my show, that in the last year of life that is when there is this huge number of people dropping out of Medicare Advantage and going back to regular Medicare. And it's because the lemon dropping, because that's at that point, that last year of life is the most expensive year of life. And that's the point at which the insurance companies just make life awful for you.
Right. And then how do you get back onto regular Medicare? Then it's like
you can get back to Medicare, and that
you just can't get the gap coverage.
But yeah, you've got the insurance companies that write the gap coverage are like, sorry, Charlie.
Right.
We don't do this.
Yeah. I don't think people are really, I mean, you know, until you're at that age, you don't, you know, the fact that I now get the AARP is very weird.
Yeah.
Like
well,
that's
I paid no attention to it until I turned 65. And then it was like, holy cow, what is this?
Yeah. And yet Medicare is something that is like the most successful program that we have. People are extremely happy with their Medicare. That's right. It is something that needs to be expanded. And the idea that to do it as a two-tier system, it's almost like it's destined for failure. And then they'll be able to say, see, you can't have it, doesn't work. It's socialism doesn't work. When in fact, it doesn't work because of lemon dropping and cherry picking. Right.
Because they sabotaged it from the get-go. Yeah.
Right. Because they're only having to cover wealthy people, and they're making it, or healthy people. And it's, well, healthy and wealthy people. And it's just, it's extremely elitist also. But notice it's a very elitist thing. So what I wanted to talk about is the idea of this statewide efforts that are pushing universal health care. In a sense, like I have this theory that you throw everything against the wall and see what sticks. So I obviously support the movement for national Medicare for all, but there are a couple of states that are closer than others in getting it. And I thought it was interesting that in the history, the two states that were historically doing it are the two states that are doing it now, like primarily of New York and California.
And Vermont. Vermont was the first, actually.
Vermont was the first.
Yeah.
Okay. So what happened to those plans? Like, this is not people think this is like the first time this is all coming up, and it isn't. People have been trying to do this for a long time.
Yeah. First, just a super quick background. This is how Canada got single-payer health insurance. Yeah. Saskatchewan did it first, Tommy Douglas, the premier. And it was back in the early 60s, and it was so successful that all the other provinces wanted it. And within a decade, it had spread across the nation. And then the federal government jumped in and put together a payment system. So if somebody from Saskatchewan gets sick in Ontario, they can route the money between the provinces. So about a decade ago in Vermont, Peter Shumlin, who was the head of the Vermont Senate, he was a senator, ran for governor, and he ran on the platform of Medicare for all, single-payer healthcare in Vermont. He was elected. The Democrats took the House and Senate. They passed it. He signed it, put it into law. Hired a friend of mine actually as his head of whatever they call it in Vermont, the Health and Welfare Administration. To put it into place. And what they discovered was that back in '65, when Lyndon Johnson put together Medicare, he wanted to make sure that Medicare money didn't go to the southern states and they take the money but refuse to give services to Black people. So there's kind of an audit trail from the federal dollars being written or being sent down to the state to the ultimate consumer of healthcare. And if you insert a single-payer system, a state-based single-payer system, into that, it breaks that chain. And so what came out of this, even though Medicare for all is the law of the land right now in Vermont, or single-payer healthcare is the law of the land in Vermont, it has been for years, was they couldn't put it into place because all of the Medicare money and all of the Medicaid money coming into the state, which is billions and billions of dollars, would go to zero. It would just vanish. And the state would have to start paying for everybody over 65 and all the working poor. And that would have just bankrupted Vermont. So the magic words, when you call your state your U.S. representative, member of the House of Representatives, and your two senators at 202-224-3121, the magic words are Congress needs to pass a state waiver so that Medicare and Medicaid waiver so that individual states can put into place single-payer healthcare systems. The actual legal mumbo jumbo has to do with ERISA and all these acronyms and stuff. But if you just say it like that, they understand exactly what you're talking about. Democrats have been trying to get this through Congress for 2 decades now, And of course, the insurance companies and the Republicans fight it tooth and nail. But that's what we need to do.
I mean, look, we could also say there's a fair share of Democrats that are not playing ball with us also. I mean, not all Democrats are the same. Not all Democrats are created equal, Tom.
Oh yeah, just down the road, you know, I'm here in Portland, and just a little bit south of Portland, the district that is represented by Kurt Schrader, and he's the guy. He was one of the Democrats who yesterday voted to kill the ability of Medicare to negotiate drug prices. He was the deciding vote that killed it.
Yeah, it's very frustrating. And I even look at the numbers that we see. There's, I forget, 100 and something Congress members that are in the quote unquote progressive caucus. And yet none of them or so many of them are not really loud on this. They might say, okay, yeah, if it gets put there, then I'll sign it, kind of, you know, whatever. But if all of the people that were on that bill were really out pushing it and really fighting for it and trying to bring in other people into Congress that also supported the idea of having a nonprofit healthcare system, I think it would be a lot more effective than just sitting there waiting for it to happen.
I agree.
And that's a lot of the Democrats too right now.
Yeah, I would add, though, that the lesson of the 60s of how Lyndon Johnson got the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, Medicare, Medicaid, you know, all that stuff passed, is it takes leadership. And that's why I was really pleased to see that yesterday Joe Biden met privately with Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. We still, you know, we don't know what came out of that, but things are moving forward.
I hope so. Somebody needs to put those two in their place. Like, it's like they're just not, or at some point, don't you think you would look at certain people and you're just not a Democrat. You're just not a Democrat. Accept that. Like Joe Manchin is not a Democrat. Just accept that and move on.
Well, you know, Joe goes along with the Democratic Party on the things that don't really influence his taxes or his coal business. You know, we just learned, The Intercept just did some amazing reporting that he has started 3 different coal companies. His son owns one of them. He's divested himself, or he's got them in a blind trust. He made $500,000 last year off coal. And his daughter is the head of, or was the head of Mylan Pharmaceuticals, you know, the company that tripled the price of EpiPens. And so it's like, you know, it's kind of all in the family, right? But, you know, in some ways, at least we've got 50 Democrats in the Senate. I mean, the fear is if you lean on Joe Biden or Kyrsten Sinema too, and Kyrsten Sinema, I think, is kind of I think she's just she thinks she's John McCain. You know, she's trying to become famous, you know, as the mavericky person, because she's from Arizona. And Arizonans are just not buying it. So instead, she's now sucking up to the billionaire class, the right-wing billionaire class, and the Mitch McConnell. But if they leave the Democratic Party, like Jim Jeffords of Vermont left the Republican Party in the early 2000s and flipped the Senate to the Democrats, it would be a disaster. So, you know, yeah, we want to lean on them, we want to push them, but we don't want to beat them up too bad.
Yeah, one of the outside strategies I see people in the chat are talking about Jen still believes things can be changed from the inside. Well, no, but the inside exists and somebody has to be in there doing it. So, you know. But I think that it obviously requires a lot of movement on the outside. And one of the things that I'm noticing, and I'm very happy to say, is a really big surge in labor right now in terms of the different risings all over. And granted, mainstream media is not covering it anywhere near as much, if at all. But I do think that, and you pointed this out quite a bit in the book, there is this huge historic connection between labor and healthcare. And I think that we talk about it all the time when we talk to labor people. I mean, the idea of giving people a single payer healthcare and removing that from the burden of collective bargaining, like taking that off their table so that people don't have to be like the other benefits can just be money for them and not having to fight about how little you can get.
Now you can negotiate for pensions.
Right. Which now they're already starting to take that off the table. We have some serious issues here with firefighter pensions are being attacked for a change. And the thing about healthcare with a lot of the unions is that takes up a chunk of their negotiations. And it's still pitiful. We've got a firefighter collective bargaining agreement down here that literally says which cancers are covered and which cancers are not covered. And of course, there are several of the uncovered cancers that are more seen in people that are firefighters because they're exposed to so many things. So this is the way they get around it. And so I just was wondering what your thoughts are in terms of like the recent labor stuff that we've been seeing lately all around the country.
Labor's split on this. You've got some unions that are very proud of the health policies they've negotiated and are opposed to single payer healthcare because of that. And you've got other unions that realize just the simple logic of it that you just laid out. So, we'll see where this goes. But at the end of the day, we've got to figure out a way to bring labor around.
Yeah. I mean, I actually believe that we don't have a labor party at all anymore. And that's just, we have two corporate parties. We have two parties that are really beholden to corporate interests, and nobody speaks for labor. So when people are talking about creating a third party, which I'm supportive of that too. I really am. I am supportive of any and all ideas that are trying to help people move forward. But I feel like we don't really have a second that is sticking up for labor. And so any real viable third party to me would really have to be labor-based. I think that we need to take working people from the left and the right and realize that the economic injustice and disparity isn't something that's based on what your thoughts are on trans issues or abortion. And the economic issues are so much more massive that pull us together than the things that we bicker about that they keep us distracted with. Right. And so we generally talk a lot about labor on Mondays. It's just, we have an uplifting labor segment. I think that it is truly, that is our biggest ground swelling of movement to sort of help push these kinds of ideas forward. And it's unfortunate. I mean, we're in a right to work state here. So it's really difficult, but I was just, curious, like how you saw that in terms of the connection between labor and healthcare and where we are now. And if that would be something that would ultimately be really helpful, would be to use them for that.
Yeah, I think the Democratic Party needs to get their act together with regard to the PRO Act, and labor in general. We need a revival of labor, and again, Biden's talking about that. We'll see, but hopefully they can do something.
Right, and what was interesting to me in your book when you're talking about the labor march, and of course I had to write this down because my best friend's from Winnipeg. So any and all things that have to do with Winnipeg, I have to sort of like make a mental note because did you know it's the Slurpee capital of the world?
I didn't.
It is. Winnipeg is the Slurpee capital of the world. And also for people who don't know, it is also the namesake of Winnie the Pooh. So I don't know did you know that?
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, Milne was from Winnipeg.
The things I learned from Jen.
Yeah. Well, and so Winnie is for Winnipeg. But anyway, I digress. But apparently that was where there was this huge labor march in Canada. And was that before or after Saskatchewan gave health care?
Saskatchewan got it first.
But then they tried to get it afterwards, I guess, in Manitoba or whatever fell next.
I don't recall the order. I think it might be in the book.
Yeah.
So I don't recall.
So what do you think about the idea of the states that are moving right now for it? You've got New York Health Act, you've got CalCare in California, you've got whole Washington, the Red Berets in Washington. Do you see any of this as positive, or do you see kind of like what happened to Vermont, that maybe it's not a sustainable scenario?
No, they're all going to encounter the same problem that Vermont did. Absolutely, 100%. But what it's doing is, as state after state passes laws allowing for single-payer healthcare within their states, that builds the pressure on Congress to allow them to do what they're trying to do. I mean, if particularly for those people who believe in federalism, who believe in the idea that you try to drive power from the bottom up rather than the top down, and that the states should be the laboratories of democracy. This is just the logical way to do it. And to this day in Canada, every province has just a slightly different, Medicare system. Some cover eyeglasses, some don't, that kind of stuff. And so it's how you work it out.
Right. And I still say it's so interesting to me that this is considered to be like socialism and so far to the left, like we're just these radical, crazy leftists. And yet if you go to conservative people in countries like the UK or Canada, they might not agree that there's no profit motive at all, but they would never think that people don't deserve healthcare. Like that's not, obviously they're trying to privatize in places right now, which is frustrating that they're trying to go backwards when we're trying to go forwards. But I don't know anybody that lives in other countries that doesn't think that healthcare is a human right.
Right. Well, it's like fire departments. I mean, you know, back in the early 20th century, late 19th century, we made the transition in this country from for-profit fire departments where you had to buy an annual subscription and put a shield out in front of your house, and they would just keep driving by if you didn't have that shield if your house was on fire. You know, we all figured out that was kind of dumb because houses have a tendency to catch each other on fire, and then you've got the Chicago fire, right? And so we decided, let's all get together and everybody pay a little bit of taxes, and we'll fund the fire departments. And if somebody's house catches on fire, it's taken care of. Aren't our bodies as important as our houses?
Well, doesn't COVID spread like fire?
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, aren't we literally seeing the exact same thing happen with healthcare right now, like in live time?
Yeah, the metaphor is perfect.
Yeah, I actually think that the next time I ever get the question about the idea about whether or not we need private insurance or private healthcare, I'm going to suggest that people go get their private fire policy and their private fire insurance. Like, it's so absurd. And it's just, I don't understand how that's remotely logical to anybody. And obviously to the powers that be. It's not based on reason and logic. It's based on profit. But to the people that are like peers and people that are still not like full proponents of single payer healthcare, I just don't understand it. I feel like it's sort of like talking to flat earthers to me. Like, I really just don't understand that. How do you deal with that? Or do you still even have to deal with those people? That are you now in a the crowd is expanded enough that for the most part you're dealing with people that know the earth isn't flat?
I still get my share of crazies. You know, it's like, just look around. It's just nuts. It's just nuts.
Yeah, I mean, some people are just, I call them too far gones. I guess that's what a lot of people call them. They're just too far gones, and isn't
living in the right wing talk radio bubble is what they're doing.
Yeah, I have no problem with when I've gone on shows that are conservative shows. Like, I don't mind it because I'm still saying my message. So if that reaches more people, then that's fine. I went on Tim Pool's show. And I actually ended up getting subscribers from that. So those people are now listening to so to me, that's a good thing. Like, I think that if you're being consistent with your message, you should say it everywhere.
Yeah,
staying in your echo chamber is useless. Yep. And I just think a lot of people are not, we see so much pushback. I don't know how much of the petty nonsense on the left you're aware of. You strike me as somebody who is way, way, way beyond dealing with this nonsense.
No, I'm very aware of it. It's
okay. So you're aware of what we're dealing with. I mean, like, I'm watching it in the comments right now in live time, like the nonsense. I am the cause of all the problems, Tom. I am so many. I am the reason. Wow. I am the reason that Nina Turner didn't win her congressional seat. It was because I told her or suggested the idea that it wouldn't be a good idea to maybe go on a Julian Assange telethon during her campaign. That is, I don't know if you knew this, that I'm that powerful, but apparently that is the reason that Nina lost her congressional seat. Yeah. I'm just saying.
Don't feed the trolls, Jim.
I know. It's crazy, but I'm off social media entirely now because of all of this. Like, it's too toxic for me. So it's been about 8 or 9 months that I just don't even participate in it, but it's so defeating. And the amount of nonsense that we're dealing with, where they just want us to be in our own echo chambers.
You're also dealing with foreigners who are pretending to be Americans, and this
is that true? Like, really, do you have that in a lot of cases? Are you finding that?
Oh yeah, on social media, absolutely, it's huge.
And what do you think? I mean, the people that I see a lot they proclaim to be leftists, but yet their only ideas of direct action are sort of like attacking other people, like going after the fraud squad or attacking other content creators or whatever, and not really doing anything productive.
There's a reason why in the last election, the Republican Party in Idaho and Utah was funding the Green Party. I mean, divide and conquer. It's just, there's a huge effort by conservatives and big money to do anything they can to destroy any kind of solidarity on the left, whether it's the kind of moderate corporate left or whether it's the democratic socialist left like me. It's a concerted effort, and they're not going to give up because there's big bucks at stake.
Yeah, and I do, and there are people that are on that call themselves on the left that I do wonder where they're getting their paychecks from. Yeah. Like I do think that, not in a sense like, oh, it's Putin puppets. Like, I'm not like paranoid about the Russians are coming, but just in a sense that they're clearly not in this for the same reasons that I'm in this. Like, clearly we're not. So Doug says, thanks for being here. Greetings from People's Republic of Boulder. And I, of course, had to put that up because I went to the People's Republic of Boulder.
Very cool.
Yeah, I am a CU grad, so that great. I had to put that up. But so what you're working, talk about what you're working on next. You had said that there was something coming out about privacy next, and what did you do? How did you prepare to do that? Like, I'm almost scared to know. I'm almost scared to read that because I'm not paranoid, but I don't want to be paranoid. But why don't you give us a little like preview of what that's going to be about?
Well, that book, which will be out in 6 months, is about how both governments and corporations are basically spying on us for their own purposes, and also how warfare is changing. How the next war will probably be fought in cyberspace, and in fact, we're already seeing the beginnings of that. And it's a kind of a deep dive into a deep topic, and I try to make it very accessible to people. But it's, it's going to be the hidden history of Big Brother. And Jen, yeah. I've got to run here fairly soon.
Oh, go. It's okay. Is there something you want? Okay, I just wanted to give you an opportunity to plug whatever it is that you're working on, whatever you're working on next.
I appreciate that. No, I think this book right now, I think this is the most important one of the series. I was, gung ho about the guns book at the very beginning, but healthcare this is something that impacts literally everybody in America. It is, it's between 17 and 24%, depending on how you calculate it, of our entire economy. And by the way, it's between 10 and 14% in most of the developed countries because they don't have all the,
right.
These for-profit leeches.
And better outcomes outcomes than we have. Yeah, that's absolutely. The thing.
Yeah. It's single-payer healthcare. You reduce infant mortality, you reduce maternal mortality, you expand lifespan. We are, of the 11 richest countries, we rank number 11. Of the 34 OECD countries, we rank around 33, and that goes all the way down to like Costa Rica, countries that have single-payer systems. And we have just terrible outcomes in the United States. We've got infant mortality rates and maternal mortality rates that are so far below any other first world country that they're in third world territory. And again, most all of that is being driven by those 12 former slave states that refuse to expand Medicaid.
Yeah, which I'm in one. So, and Florida will be the absolute last state. If we're still above sea level, we will be the last state to have healthcare. Thank you so much, Tom, for coming on and talking about your book. Guys, you should check it out. I will say though, have you ever considered doing your own Audible?
The publisher wanted me to. The problem is that because I'm trying to produce 2 of these books a year, I'm writing the next book while I'm doing the last book. And I do a 3-hour radio show every morning. I get home at noon, and then I write for 5 hours every afternoon. And there's just no time to do the Audible book. It would be fun. But my work day is from 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. And it just I couldn't fit it in.
Okay, well, the guy who did it did a good job. I don't know his name, but he did a good job. It wasn't like an annoying one. I've listened to some before where I'm like, oh, they could have picked somebody a little better for this. But thank you so much. I appreciate it. And we'll have you back when you've got your next book out.
Thank you, Jen. It's great talking to you. Great seeing you again. Thanks so much for having me. Really
Bye.
It. Okay, good night.
Always fun talking with Tom. It's a very wealth of good historical information, which I totally appreciate. I do have good news and amuse today, guys. So it's kind of strange that Peter's not here, and but then again, I picked all the stories, so it works just as well. I'm going to go ahead and set that up. Okay. So there were a few things really this week that I found to be really interesting, actually. So this one is a story that it's funny to me that this is news because it's something that I feel like we already knew, which is why I changed the graphic to be the Scooby-Doo, because that's how ridiculous I feel about this story. So the FBI or Joe Biden declassified 9/11 documents that essentially finally say what had been that was previously reported as a chance meeting between future hijackers wasn't, that we knew this was all happening. So let's see, codename of it. Okay. The FBI, so this release of documents is the first of what was expected to be several documents in response to this the September 3rd executive order that the president signed. His order stated information collected and generated in the United States government's investigation of the 9/11 terrorist attacks should now be disclosed, except when the strongest possible reasons counsel otherwise. That's one of those things where I don't know, well, whose discretion that is when they, that decides that. But this is the first official U.S. acknowledgement that a relationship existed between individuals connected to the government of Saudi Arabia and the attacks that occurred 20 years ago. So this is the first official record that there was a relationship between the government of Saudi Arabia and two of the terrorists that were responsible for the 9/11 attacks. And apparently, and this is a really good quote from a family member of someone who died at the World Trade Center. And this gentleman, Brett Eagleson, says, "Today marks the moment when the Saudis cannot rely on the U.S. government from hiding the truth about 9/11. And again, this is something that I feel like we've already known, that Saudi Arabia is one of the largest sponsors of terrorism, state-sponsored terrorism. Like, this is a country that, I'm pretty sure they still behead people. Like this is not people that we should be in bed with and should be friends with, and certainly not selling all of our weapons to. But anyway, so we finally have declassified that. So duh. The next story that I find really interesting is based on our friend Bob Woodward's new book, which just came out, I guess, and I'm not promoting it or anything like that. I just find this very interesting. So I had seen people basically going after General Milley, like that this is somehow treason and what he did and how could he have done that while Trump was president and so on and so forth. And really what they're talking about is that General Milley after the January 6th insurrection felt that Trump had lost his mind and reached out to his counterparts, specifically his counterpart in China, and basically said, look, you don't need to worry. I've got this under control. You don't need to worry about the crazy person in the White House. And apparently now that's ruffling some people wrong. I have a couple of things to say about this. One, we know this. The president is not really the person in charge. And I've said this to a lot of people before, like, does it make you feel better or worse to know that Trump is not really the person in charge? Because some people like that, some people don't like that. But there are safeguards in place so that can't happen. But the fact that anybody would call this general any sort of traitor or committing treason, which of course it isn't, and it's just ludicrous. This gentleman never swore an oath to Donald Trump. This man swore an oath to protect this country from all terrorists, foreign and domestic. So this is somebody who was doing his job. I don't know all the details of the conversations and who he spoke with, but it sounds to me like he was doing exactly what he's supposed to do, protecting this country from terrorists, foreign and domestic. So there is that. I want to go to first the states that have welcomed the most refugees from Afghanistan. This is sort of like my kudos for the week. I find it especially, it's relevant coming off of talking with Stephanie. Obviously, Washington has a very huge refugee population. They are one of the states that has taken a lot of refugees. And to give kudos, yay to California, Texas, Virginia, Washington, Maryland, and New York. Really, those are the top states that have taken in, and California far more than anybody else have taken in the most Afghan refugees. This is since 2001 that this has been keeping track. but it's really going to be a massive undertaking that we're dealing with now. And I really just wanted to be giving kudos to the people in the countries that are doing this. And, you know, anyone who would be opposed to taking in refugees, what's wrong with you? What is wrong with you? These are people that are in dire straits and need help. That's what we're supposed to do. That's the right thing to do. So anyway, kudos to them. And finally, we have the failed recall in California. Who would have thunk? Everybody. And it's been attempted many times. This is probably, I guess, one of the closer times that they've come to actually being able to do it. But it's really a very futile effort. And and we don't need to get into the demon that was on the other side of that, because really it's just, he is not worth our energy. But regardless of what you think of Gavin Newsom, that gentleman was not the solution. Okay, so apparently, per this new poll, in comparison to the 2018 exit poll, Newsom lost ground with white voters without a college degree, Latino voters, Black voters, but was able to offset those losses with dramatic gains in white voters with a college degree. Go figure. So basically, the polling comparison, he won college voters 59% to 40% in 2018, but now in this recall, the margin was 68% to 32%. So it shows a large erosion with your non-college educated voters, Gavin. Maybe it's because you were sitting at some really big elitist event without a mask on your face while you shut down the rest of your state. Maybe that pissed off some people. Might have pissed off some folks. Just saying. So with that, that's basically the end of the news and amuse. And let's see if I have anything interesting. Yeah, I agree. The recall never should have happened. It's just silly. You know what? It's being done by people that really are just wanting to thwart everything. They have nothing better to offer. They're not offering anything better, because if they were offering something better, then there would have been a better candidate. But there wasn't a better candidate. You can't have a candidate that calls abortion murder and thinks that reparations should be paid to slave owners win a state like California. Not going to happen. So, you know, I don't know who thought that would happen, really. But yeah, and since Elder was our bootlicker last week, it kind of, you know, it rings very true. But yeah, that was always silly. And, you know, look, Gavin Newsom, ever since I can recall, people have been dissatisfied with the governors of California. I can't remember the last time. Well, the truth is, I can't remember the last time people were satisfied with governors anywhere. If you live in a state where you're satisfied with the governor, please drop it in the comments section. You know, being from Florida, like I said when Tom was on, we come from having Rick Scott for 8 years. That man is guilty of the largest Medicare fraud in the history of this country. This is not like, Florida is not a good breeding ground for like honorable leadership. So we're very skewed here. We sort of have like battered spouse syndrome. We really don't think we deserve better. So for us, or, you know, I look at Ron DeSantis, and as much as I'm not a fan, I just can't find him as gross as I found Rick Scott. But then again, who is? So we're in a low place here. But if somebody would, I'd love to know if somebody has a governor of their state that they actually like, or isn't having to resign because of being, you know, a little too rapey, or a little too offensive, or a little too touchy or handsy, you know, whatever it is. Do you have a state? Is there a state with a decent governor? Yeah. Charlie Crist was just on, he was on, oh yeah. So Charlie Crist has no chance of beating Ron DeSantis. Sorry, he doesn't. I don't even know that he can beat Nikki Fried, but he can't beat Ron DeSantis. So it's kind of sad. And it should really make people wonder, like, is that really what the Democrats in the state of Florida have to offer somebody to run against Ron DeSantis? Is that the best they could do? Is that the best they've got is Charlie Crist? Really? People, this is just not how it's going to work. Oh, you've got Mike DeWine and he's trying. Yeah. All right. Well, so he's trying to stop abortion. Well, a lot of people are trying to stop abortion. They somehow think that they're going to actually be able to stop abortion. They're not. And really all they're going to succeed in is killing women and babies. So it's interesting that the pro-life people are actually doing behavior that will end up being more pro-death. But that would require science and reason to be employed in these decisions, and it's not. I feel somewhat optimistic that at least for right now, our state does not seem very hip, or at least Ron DeSantis did not seem very hip on going the Texas route with the civil litigation against abortion facilitators and providers. My understanding was Ron DeSantis was not jazzed on that. So that's, look, it's going to happen everywhere at some point. They're going to keep trying to push this. And yeah, you're right. They are pro-birth. They're not pro-life. Because once kids are alive, they don't want to actually give them things like, healthcare and education. So that's not exactly pro-life. It isn't. I was just having this conversation with my son today. I find this really interesting, people. So I don't know about other states like Florida does, but we have so many different state license plates here. So many different ones. Like there's license plates for everything, all the sports teams, all the schools, every cause, every agency. There's a John Lennon license plate that I think the money for those all go to different things. The John Lennon one goes to like the food bank. It goes to like ending hunger. But there's different ones. And one of the ones we have in Florida, for people who don't know, well, there's two that I find particularly repugnant. One is worse than the other. So the first one that we have, I wish I had a picture of it. It's Choose Life. It says Choose Life. And it's a bright yellow license plate with pictures of like two kids' faces, like cartoon looking kids' faces on it. It says Choose Life. And I know when I see that I don't like the person in that car. I don't like the person in that car. I don't want to know the person in that car. And it's not because that they're pro-life. I have friends that are pro-life. It's because they are so adamant about telling you that you're wrong, but that they're willing to put a license plate on their car to say Choose Life, as if the opposition is saying choose death. So here was my idea. I think that we should get together and have a license plate in Florida. Now picture it right now. A black license plate, okay, with a white outline of a wire hanger, and it says Choose Death. And that's it, and nothing else. It just says Choose Death, and then you have your license plate number and all that, and we sell that. Or it could be a picture of the Grim Reaper with the, like the sickle thing, and it could say Choose Death. But yeah, I've been marinating on that for a long time. And then, the other license plate that we have in Florida that I also find repugnant is the one that says Family Values. Because I don't know, pretty much everyone I know has family values. You have a family and your family has values. You have family values. So what you're saying by that is they don't have your family's values. So I find that gross. I don't know if other states have that or not, but, yeah, I agree. Getting involved in women's healthcare is just it's a political win in a sense that it rallies the people that they need to rally. That's why they do it. There are the crusaders that truly do believe what they're saying, but a lot of them, it's just really a distraction, and it rallies the base to come out and vote in election cycles because they get all the religious people to come out and support their stuff. Yeah, no, you're right. It was the Ronald Reagan years was sort of the infiltration of the Christian right, like more than ever. And that whole televangelism and all of that stuff started. Lulu, cut it out. Hey, it's gross. She's licking. So, that was definitely, I think, took us to an even darker place with women's reproductive freedom, for sure. It was never an issue that people were willing to fight about. It shouldn't be anybody's business. And it's still infuriating to me that we're having this discussion. It's 2021 and we're still talking about my uterus like it's somebody else's business. And it's so absurd to me. And so this is what I think, like when I say choose death, I'm kind of not really being completely hyperbolic, because in a way I feel like, I do get the idea that people think that abortion is murder. I do. I understand that. It's a living thing. I've been pregnant a few times. I understand that there is a living thing and you're killing that. And so I'm just willing to concede that it is murder. I'm willing to concede that. I'm willing to concede it's murder. And that still doesn't change my position on being vehemently pro-choice. So that's the thing. When people say to me, oh, well, it's murder. All right. I'll just take that. That's why I'm really thinking the Choose Murder license plate might be the way to go. But anyway, guys, if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. If you're not patrons and you would like to be a patron, please go to our Patreon. Patreon.com, Generational Change. You get the Lulu sticker. Lulu, look how cute. Wait, I got to get it to focus. Can't focus. She's got a Generational Change tag around her neck. It's really, really cute. And yeah, join, help, subscribe, help us facilitate. Let me see what we have coming up on Monday, if it's already in the book. Peter often is working on that, and I don't always know who's on until right before. Let's see who we have Monday. Aha. Okay, this is really cool, guys. So on Monday, Farron Cousins is coming on. I don't know if you're familiar with Farron Cousins. He has a show called Ring of Fire. He's great. And I basically keep a running list of things I want to talk about with different people. And then I tell Peter, get them on. And so then I've got like a list of things I want to talk about with different people. And I have a lot of stuff to talk about with him. If you haven't checked out his show called Ring of Fire, I highly suggest you do. And then our candidate will be, let me see, Cindy Banyai from Florida's 19th. Florida's 19th is somewhere in the middle. Everything is somewhere in the middle. But so no, 19th would probably be, that's just above Sheila. So you're talking like Vero maybe and in that area. I don't know. We'll find out. But guys, check us out on Monday. If you're not subscribed, please do so. And that's basically all for tonight. Jen out.